A breathtakingly beautiful black housekeeper, Yasmin Carter, whose long, flowing hair hides more than just beauty. It hides brilliance. By night, she quietly cleans the glass walls of a towering corporation. By day, she becomes the anonymous genius behind the company's dramatic rise from the edge of collapse. When her secret advice begins to change everything, the powerful CEO, Kenneth Lancaster, golden-haired and guarded, becomes obsessed with uncovering the stranger who's saving his empire. But behind the boardrooms and gala lights, darker forces are at play: betrayal, blackmail, and a vengeful ex-fiancé who will stop at nothing. What begins as a whisper in the dark grows into a revolution that challenges power, prejudice, and fate itself. As you drift deeper into this story, we invite you to rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments, just before you fall asleep. Who do you think will win, power or brilliance in disguise? Let's find out. The city never truly slept, not even at midnight, when most windows dimmed and streets exhaled their last rush of traffic. From the 30th floor of the Lancaster Tower, however, the world still glittered through glass panels that stretched from the ceiling to the floor. Yasmin Carter stood alone in the vast, empty executive suite, the skyline flickering against the polished windows like fireflies. Dressed in her navy blue eco-clean uniform and white sneakers, with her thick, dark hair tied low but still cascading past her shoulders, she moved like a whisper through the silent office. In one hand, she held a spray bottle. In the other, a cloth folded with practiced grace. The world saw a cleaner, a background figure passing through after hours. But Yasmin, if anyone had bothered to look closer, carried something far more dangerous than disinfectant, a mind sharp enough to cut through corporate failure. The office she stepped into was colder than the rest, more sterile, with leather furniture that smelled untouched and a desk so large it could double as a dining table. This was Kenneth Lancaster's space. The young, golden-haired billionaire CEO, known as much for his jawline as his ruthless market instincts. Yasmin had only ever seen him in headlines, never in person, and she preferred it that way. She had a routine: clean the floor in swift, systematic loops, avoid personal items, never touch the screen, and above all, never linger. But that night, a reggaeton beat slipped through her earbuds, catchy and bold, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to move with it. She twirled with the mop handle like it was a dance partner, let her hips sway gently, and laughed at the absurdity. "If anyone saw this, I'd be fired before sunrise," she murmured with a grin, right before the elevator dinged. She froze. The bucket rattled as she tried to step back. The broom clattered to the floor. She barely had time to kill the music and duck beneath the imposing desk before the glass door swung open. Her breath caught in her throat. Kenneth Lancaster walked in, shoulders stiff with tension, jaw clenched, as he threw his briefcase onto the desk without noticing the mop handle leaning against the chair. He pressed the speakerphone button. "I need that update now," he said, voice low but urgent. The response crackled through the line. Bad news. 2 major contracts canceled, shareholders whispering, a financial quarter about to bleed red. Kenneth said nothing at first, but then, quieter, more to himself than to the man on the other end, he muttered, "If I fall alone." He ended the call and stood at the window, silent, staring into the city that had once crowned him king. Under the desk, Yasmin stayed frozen, her pulse thudding like war drums in her ears. What she had just heard wasn't gossip. It was a corporate confession, the kind of information people got sued for leaking. She could hardly believe it. Kenneth Lancaster, the man on magazine covers, was crumbling from the inside. When he finally left, unaware of the witness beneath his feet, Yasmin waited a full minute before crawling out. Her limbs shook as if she'd run a marathon. "Congratulations, Yasmin," she whispered, glancing around. "You're officially an accidental corporate spy." She stared at the piles of papers on his desk. Graphs, bleeding red ink, contracts with angry stamps, projections that nosedived like falling stars. She didn't plan to read them, but her eyes, trained long ago in late-night library sessions and online business forums, couldn't look away. She recognized contract codes, supplier patterns, and cash flow cycles. The company was in trouble, yes, but she also saw something else, a way out. Impulsively, without giving herself the chance to second-guess, she left the office, went to the reception desk, and grabbed a blank notepad and pen. Returning to the office, she sat in Kenneth's chair, not with arrogance but with reverence, and started writing. Renegotiate Southern Branch contract using Clause 13B. Staggered delivery over 120 days. Estimated savings, 18-20%. Buys time to fix liquidity. At the bottom, she wrote, "Sometimes solutions come from where no one expects." She folded the note cleanly and tucked it beneath the monitor. Then she stood, realigned the chair, picked up her cleaning gear, and walked out without looking back. But her heart raced to the elevator. Had she just crossed a line? Probably. Had she committed corporate fraud? Maybe. Yet something in her gut told her she had done the right thing. The company might not know it yet, but tonight, someone had just handed it a lifeline, and no one would ever guess it came from the quiet girl who cleaned the office after midnight. The next morning, Kenneth arrived earlier than usual. He tossed his jacket over the chair, loosened his tie, and opened his laptop. That's when he noticed the folded piece of paper beneath the monitor. He frowned and picked it up. As he read the note once, then again, his eyes narrowed. The suggestion wasn't just bold, it was surgically precise. The clause existed, rarely used, but legitimate. And the savings projection? Plausible. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "Did anyone access my office after hours?" Priscilla's voice came through quickly. "Only the night cleaning crew, no one else on record." Kenneth hung up, stared at the handwriting again, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like drowning. Instead, he felt something unexpected: hope. And somewhere far below that gleaming office, Yasmin finished wiping down the break room counter, unaware that the note she left had just changed her life, and his, forever. Kenneth Lancaster couldn't shake the thought of the note. Not just what it said, but how it was written. The handwriting was sharp but elegant, the ink steady, as if the writer knew exactly what they were doing. The logic was sound, the numbers were real, and when he pitched the renegotiation that afternoon, the Southern Branch folded faster than expected. The clause worked. 19% in cost savings. Exactly as predicted. But what gnawed at Kenneth wasn't the relief of having a financial quarter saved. It was the mystery. Who had left the note? Who knew his company well enough to dissect it from the shadows? He spent the rest of the day turning it over in his hands, eyes drifting between meetings, distracted by the same thought. Someone inside this building had a mind sharper than his entire executive board, and they were hiding. That night, Yasmin Carter wiped down the glass doors on the 28th floor, with her heart still fluttering in her chest. Her anonymous note had worked, and not just in theory. It had shifted something real. She had watched from the corner of the reception area as Priscilla handed Kenneth a new printout of revised financials, her voice lowered in a surprised tone. "Cash flow is already improving," she'd said, and Kenneth had simply nodded, his expression unreadable. Yasmin couldn't believe it. A single piece of paper, written in silence, had changed the course of a multi-million-dollar corporation. But along with that pride came danger, because now she knew he would start searching. The question wasn't if he'd find her, it was when. By the end of the week, Kenneth had received 2 more notes. Each was found in the same place, tucked neatly under his monitor. The second suggested liquidate aging assets in the supply chain to free up dead capital. The third outlined a personnel optimization method inspired, curiously, by a scene from a Latin American soap opera where a family business had survived bankruptcy by merging conflicting departments. At first, Kenneth thought the references were a joke, but when he ran the numbers, everything held up. The strategies weren't just working, they were brilliant. Unconventional, yes, but undeniably effective. Now the company wasn't just stable, it was accelerating, and Kenneth? He was obsessed. He called Priscilla into his office the following Monday. "I need access logs. Again," he said. And when she frowned, he added, "Cross-reference badge entries after 10 p.m., with any anomalies. Cleaners, maintenance, temp staff. Anyone who's not part of the executive team." Priscilla looked at him, puzzled, but did as she was told. When the list came back, it showed only one company had entered during those hours: EcoClean. "Just the cleaning crew, sir," she said. "No one else." Kenneth leaned back in his chair and muttered to himself, "Then one of them is a damn genius." Yasmin, unaware of the full extent of Kenneth's curiosity, began feeling a strange mixture of thrill and guilt. Each night, she wrote her anonymous notes on the same plain notepad, signing them with a small mark. Just 3 dots in a triangle. Her way of leaving a fingerprint without leaving a name. She couldn't help it. Each time she read a contract left on his desk, her mind lit up with possibilities, solutions, angles the board hadn't explored. She told herself it wasn't spying. The papers were just sitting there, and she never took anything. She only gave. And it felt good, too good. But it was also getting harder to ignore the feeling that her quiet rebellion wouldn't stay secret for long. One evening, as she passed Sophie, her co-worker and closest friend, in the janitor's closet, Sophie raised an eyebrow and said, "You're glowing like you got promoted to CEO." Yasmin laughed nervously and replied, "I'm just getting more efficient with the mop." But Sophie didn't press, though her look lingered, curious. That night, when Yasmin walked into Kenneth's office and saw the soft light still glowing on his monitor, she hesitated. Was he still there? Her fingers itched to leave another note, something about the upcoming product launch that, based on the patterns she'd seen, could benefit from staggered regional testing. But she paused. The risk was getting real now. What if he had cameras? What if he had already guessed? At the same moment, Kenneth sat in the security room 2 floors below, watching playback footage in fast forward. Though the cameras inside executive offices were disabled after hours for privacy reasons, the hallway cams told him enough. A woman, tall, slim, hair long and dark, had entered his floor around midnight, paused outside his office, and walked in with a mop cart. He froze the frame. She was wearing a cap, and the angle hid her face. But something about the way she walked, the way she paused in front of the door, gave him pause. She didn't look like someone just cleaning. She looked like someone thinking. That night, Kenneth returned to his office before heading home. He opened the drawer where he kept the notes, now 4 of them, and read them again. Soap opera metaphors, flawless strategy, insight that no one on his team possessed. "You're smarter than any of them," he whispered into the empty room. "And you're right under my nose." His fingers tapped the edge of the paper, then stopped as he noticed something on the most recent note. The dots, 3 of them, forming a triangle, a code, a signature. "You want to be found," he said softly. "You just want to be sure I'm smart enough to do it." Yasmin, back on the ground floor, was washing out her bucket in the maintenance sink. Her reflection flickered in the mirror above. Just another night worker with calloused hands and a tired back. But in her mind, she was building strategy maps, drafting organizational pivots, and calculating internal value losses before the board even suspected them. She knew the hunt had begun, and part of her wanted to be caught. Just not yet. Not before she left one more note. The gala glittered like something out of a dream, or a trap, depending on who you were. From the 35th floor ballroom, the city below looked like a galaxy of lights. Crystal chandeliers cast golden reflections on champagne flutes, while laughter rippled through the crowd of suits and gowns. Kenneth Lancaster stood near the edge of the room, a drink in hand, his eyes scanning the sea of smiles with the detachment of a man who trusted no one. The quarterly celebration had gone from a tradition to a necessity, a way to pacify anxious investors after months of financial uncertainty. Yet beneath the polished surface, unease still simmered. And somewhere inside that room, Yasmin Carter moved like a shadow. She wore her best eco-clean uniform, ironed to perfection. Her hair tucked beneath a cap. Assigned with the support crew, she drifted between hors d'oeuvres tables and the service doors, unseen and unnoticed by people who rarely looked down. But Yasmin wasn't there just to sweep floors. Curiosity had brought her back to the place where all her anonymous strategy notes had taken effect. She hadn't left a new one in days, unsure whether Kenneth was getting too close. Still, something about the night felt off. She felt it in the nervous energy swirling beneath the classical music, in the way Kenneth's eyes lingered too long on the wrong people. As she passed behind a column draped with velvet, Yasmin heard a voice, sharp, cold, and unmistakably calculated. "He thinks he's clever, but he won't stay in charge much longer," the woman said. Yasmin stilled. She recognized the voice immediately. Victoria Sterling. She had seen her photo once on Kenneth's desk, half hidden under a file. She was poised, blonde, immaculately dressed, and had the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. The man beside her looked visibly tense, glancing around as if he already regretted showing up. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "Absolutely," Victoria replied. "Kenneth humiliated me in front of everyone when he ended our engagement. This is my turn." Yasmin leaned in, heart pounding, as Victoria continued. "I sabotaged the Redwood and Orion contracts myself. That was just the beginning. Now I'll hit where it hurts most. I have access to the Green Horizon launch files. Titanium Corp will release a mirror product before Lancaster even announces his. He'll look like a cheap knockoff, and his investors will turn on him like wolves." The man, David, looked away. "That's corporate espionage, Victoria." She didn't flinch. "It's justice," she said, lowering her voice, but sharpening it like a knife. Yasmin's blood turned cold. It wasn't just bitterness. It was premeditated destruction. And the worst part was, Victoria had a man on the inside, David Chung, the IT engineer, now completely entangled in her scheme. Yasmin had no idea how much he'd already leaked, but she knew one thing. If she didn't act now, the company, and Kenneth, would fall hard. Yet she couldn't exactly walk up to the CEO and say, "Hi, I'm your secret advisor, and I just eavesdropped on a plan to destroy you." No. She would have to stay in the shadows a little longer. Later that night, when the last of the guests had gone and the ballroom lights dimmed, Yasmin made her way back up to the executive suite. The halls were quieter than usual, as if the entire building was holding its breath. She crept into Kenneth's office, hands trembling, and sat at the desk. The computer screen was dark, the room dim, except for the security light blinking in the corner. Pulling out her notepad, she wrote with urgent clarity, "Urgent. Beware of enemies within. Someone is leaking information to your competitors. Green Horizon project is compromised. Monitor David Chung. He's not acting alone. A betrayal is in motion from someone close. Trust only those who prove themselves by action, not words. Your anonymous guardian." She signed it with her signature mark, 3 dots in a triangle, and placed the note on the keyboard. As she slipped out of the office and into the elevator, Yasmin's chest ached with fear. This was no longer a game of clever notes and invisible victories. She was deep inside a war she never meant to join. And now, her enemy wasn't ignorance. It was sabotage. She had seen Kenneth's eyes that night, sharp and searching. He was already close to unraveling her. But if she didn't speak, everything would collapse. If she did, she risked losing everything she had tried to build. The next morning, Kenneth arrived to find the note sitting squarely on his keyboard. The capitalized word "urgent" pulled his stomach tight. He read the message once, then again, each word sinking deeper than the last. David Chung. Internal betrayal. Green horizon. His mind raced, connecting threads he hadn't dared tug at. He picked up the phone and dialed security. "I want monitoring on our internal systems. Silent. Focus on IT activity and file access logs. Especially David Chung." When he hung up, Kenneth didn't move for a while. He simply stared at the note, holding it like a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. In the drawer beside him lay the previous 4 notes. Now there were 5. Each one had changed the course of the company, but this one had changed something in him. This wasn't about money anymore. Someone in this building, someone unknown, was not only saving his empire, they were protecting him, and he didn't even know their name. As Yasmin mopped the 18th floor hallway that night, she felt the weight of every word she had written. She had stepped too deep, gone too far. But there was no turning back now. Somewhere in the floors above, a man she had never spoken to was holding her words like they mattered more than any contract. And deep inside, Yasmin knew. The night wasn't done testing her. The real storm was still coming. 3 days had passed since Yasmin's warning note, and though she returned to her nightly cleaning shift like nothing had changed, everything had. She moved through the halls with sharper awareness, hyper-attuned to every movement, every glance from passing staff. She noticed the increased security presence, the way IT corridors buzzed with sudden tension, and the low murmurs exchanged between executives in elevators. It was clear Kenneth had acted on her warning. The trap was being laid for David Chung, and though Yasmin had no access to the outcome, she felt it in her bones. The clock was ticking for someone. Yet, amid the growing storm, something unexpected happened. A chance. A door. Left slightly ajar by fate. Yasmin was in the break room, restocking paper towels, when Tasha Williams burst through the supply closet, breathless and waving a folded page like a trophy. "You are not going to believe this," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Yasmin raised an eyebrow, amused but exhausted. "If it's another How to Clean Baseboards Faster article, I'm not interested." But Tasha shoved the paper into her hand. It was a printed job posting. Senior Business Consultant, Lancaster Corp. High salary, executive benefits, immediate start. Yasmin blinked, her hands going numb around the page. "It's real," Tasha confirmed. "And you, Yas, are going to apply." "No, not," Yasmin said quickly, handing the page back like it burned. "Look at the requirements. MBA preferred, years of consulting experience, references from God knows where. I'm a cleaning lady who didn't finish her degree." But Tasha wasn't listening. She sat Yasmin down and crossed her arms. "You're the woman who saved this company 5 times anonymously. You have a business brain sharper than most men in suits here. You quote corporate strategy from telenovelas and make it work. You are that consultant, they just don't know it yet." Yasmin tried to laugh, but her chest tightened. She wanted to believe it. She just didn't dare. That night, after finishing her shift, Yasmin sat on her bed with a blank resume template, glowing on her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as memories flooded back. Late nights, studying while her mother cried in the next room, missed exams, job rejections, whispered doubts about ever being enough. She had finished her degree eventually, taking night courses while working full-time, but had never had the chance to use it. Not until now. With a breath that trembled, She began typing. Tasha helped her polish it, choosing words like process improvement and operational insight instead of cleaning efficiency and problem-solving while mopping. It was the truth, just dressed for the part. When the application was submitted, Yasmin felt like she had flung herself off a cliff. 2 days later, as she mopped the marble floors of the 15th floor, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello, this is Priscilla Walsh from Lancaster Corp. Mr. Lancaster would like to schedule an interview with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Yasmin's grip tightened around the phone, her voice catching. Yes, that works. Thank you." As she hung up, Tasha whooped from the corner and practically threw her mop in the air. "Girl, you're going in." Yasmin smiled, but her stomach churned. She was about to walk into the lion's den, not as a cleaner, but as herself. The next day, Yasmin wore the only professional outfit she owned: pressed slacks, a soft blouse, and a blazer borrowed from Tasha's cousin. Her hair, usually pulled back under a cap, was now a smooth cascade down her back. She looked into the mirror and barely recognized herself. "You're not pretending to be someone else," she whispered to her reflection. "You're just showing them who you've always been." At exactly 2 she stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, his floor. The halls were familiar, yet utterly foreign, like seeing a dream from the other side. Priscilla greeted her with a polished smile. "Miss Carter, Mr. Lancaster will see you now." Yasmin followed her down the corridor she had mopped 100 times, past the conference room she'd cleaned in silence, past the glass doors where she had crouched unseen. When she stepped into Kenneth's office, time paused. He was standing by the window, bathed in gold light, his tie loosened but his posture crisp. He turned, and for the first time, their eyes met. "Miss Carter," he said, extending a hand. "Pleasure to meet you." She shook it, hoping he couldn't feel how hard her heart was pounding. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, praying her voice didn't tremble. The interview began like any other. Background, education, professional goals, but soon drifted into deeper waters. "Tell me," Kenneth asked, studying her across the desk, "how would you advise a company struggling with internal inefficiency and falling morale?" Yasmin didn't flinch. She leaned forward. "By looking where no one else does. Ask the janitor. Ask the receptionist. The people closest to the ground know where the cracks are before the building starts to fall." Kenneth raised an eyebrow, surprised by the confidence. "And how would you handle sabotage from within?" She didn't miss a beat. "By protecting your assets quietly, trusting patterns over promises, and never assuming loyalty comes with a title." Kenneth smiled slightly. Something in her tone, her phrasing, struck a chord. He didn't say it aloud, but his mind was racing. The phrasing, the logic, the approach. It felt familiar. Eerily familiar. By the time the interview ended, Yasmin had forgotten her nerves. They spoke for nearly an hour, covering supply chain optimization, leadership dynamics, and growth strategy. She answered with a mix of lived experience and unconventional thinking. And when Kenneth finally stood, he said, "I'll have Priscilla handle the paperwork. Welcome to Lancaster Corp, Miss Carter." Yasmin left the building in a daze. She walked through the same lobby she had cleaned the night before. But this time, she didn't carry a mop. She carried a future. She didn't know if Kenneth suspected her yet, but it no longer mattered. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the fire. And beginning Monday, Yasmin Carter would lead strategy meetings by day and return to mopping those same floors by night. The double life had begun. Yasmin Carter's first week as a senior consultant flew by in a blur of strategy meetings, stakeholder briefings, and financial analyses. But beneath the polished surface of her new position, tension coiled like a spring. Every morning, she slipped into the executive elevator with a composed face. her navy blue suit impeccable, her badge gleaming. By nightfall, she was back in the dim locker room on the sub-level, changing into her eco-clean uniform with practiced speed. She kept her hair up during the day, loose and shining, then tied it tight at night beneath a cap. Two versions of her walked the same hallways, just at different hours, and so far, no one had noticed. Or so she thought. Kenneth Lancaster had begun watching her in subtle, calculated ways. At first, it was just curiosity, an instinctual interest in this composed, unusually insightful new hire. But something about her felt familiar. Her phrasing during the interview still echoed in his mind, like a melody he couldn't name. The more he listened to her suggestions during strategy discussions, the more his suspicion grew. She spoke in a rhythm he recognized, used metaphors with just enough color to stand apart, and offered unconventional solutions that mirrored the anonymous notes that had saved his company. Still, it was a feeling, nothing more. Until the reports began to line up. On Thursday evening, Kenneth sat alone in his office, staring at two stacks of paper. On the left, he'd printed every anonymous note the mystery advisor had left him. On the right, he had Yasmin's typed proposals, memos, and meeting notes. Side by side, the structure, tone, and even certain phrases mirrored each other. Trust patterns over promises. Ask those closest to the ground. Sometimes solutions come from where no one expects. She wasn't quoting anyone else. She was quoting herself, or rather, her other self. Kenneth leaned back in his chair, stunned by the possibility that the brilliant, elusive strategist he had been chasing might have been sitting across from him all week. Still, there was no proof. He needed something concrete, something that would make her admit it without pushing too far. That night, Yasmin had just finished her last assignment and was headed to Kenneth's office to do a final wipe-down. She was exhausted, but the paycheck from her day job hadn't come in yet, and rent was due. The air on the executive floor felt heavier than usual. The building was quiet, too quiet, and she had almost convinced herself no one was around, until the elevator pinged. Panic shot through her spine. She quickly ducked into the office, hoping to finish and slip away before whoever it was reached her. She didn't realize Kenneth had never left. Hidden behind the built-in bookshelf that offered a sliver of visual coverage, Kenneth stood silently, phone to his ear, pretending to be deep in a late-night call. "I just need to confirm a hunch," he said quietly. "There's something about her. The way she speaks, the things she notices." Yasmin froze at the sound of his voice. She turned toward the door, but the footsteps were too close, and there was nowhere to go. She ducked behind the opposite end of the shelf, hidden by shadow, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "I'm going to compare handwriting from her onboarding documents," Kenneth continued, still unaware she was just feet away. "If I'm right, then Yasmin Carter isn't just a new consultant. She's the reason we're still in business." Yasmin's breath caught in her throat. She reached slowly for her cart, trying to back out of the room before he rounded the corner. But just as she shifted, her elbow nudged the edge of a shelf, and a small glass paperweight tumbled to the ground, shattering against the floor like gunfire. Kenneth turned instantly. "Who's there?" he called, stepping away from the bookshelf. Yasmin didn't wait. She bolted from her hiding spot, sprinting toward the hallway. He called out, but she didn't stop, her sneakers pounding against the marble tiles, her breath ragged. As she darted around the corner and reached the elevator, she fumbled to press the button. Behind her, Kenneth appeared in the hall, scanning for a glimpse of whoever had been in his office. He was too far away to see her face. The elevator doors slid open just in time. As the elevator descended, Yasmin leaned against the mirrored wall, gasping, shaken. Only, when she reached the ground floor, did she notice something missing: her left earring. One of the small pearl studs Tasha had lent her, the only pair she wore to both jobs. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't just been seen. She'd left evidence. The next morning, Kenneth walked the same hallway again and found it. A single pearl earring resting near the bookshelf. Delicate, feminine. Not something left by security. Not something belonging to any executive. He held it in his hand for a long moment, then made the call. "Send me a list of all female eco-clean staff assigned to the 30th floor," he told the facility's supervisor. "I need full names." By noon, he had the list. Only 3 women matched the schedule. One name stopped him cold. Yasmin Carter. He looked again at the earring, then at the name. Coincidence? Maybe. But then again, maybe not. He placed the earring gently into the drawer, next to the 5 anonymous notes, stared at them for a moment, and whispered, "You've been hiding in plain sight." Downstairs, Yasmin sat in the locker room, staring at her empty ear in the mirror, trying not to panic. She knew Kenneth was close. Too close. The life she had built, carefully, secretly, on the edge of a lie, was unraveling. The truth wasn't just lapping at her heels. It was already inside the room, and Monday was coming, fast. By Monday morning, the calm Yasmin had spent years mastering had cracked beyond repair. She stood at the full-length mirror in the executive bathroom, adjusting her blazer with trembling fingers, trying to steady her reflection. The missing earring haunted her like a silent accusation. Every time she glanced at a colleague, every step she took down the corridor felt heavier, more exposed. She avoided Kenneth's gaze in the meeting that morning, though his presence felt sharper, more alert, as if he were waiting for something, watching for a crack. She didn't dare look too long at him, afraid she might see confirmation in his eyes. "I know it was you." Her day was an endless series of mental calculations, balancing numbers on a spreadsheet, while calculating risk, weighing silence against confession, trying to keep her 2 lives from colliding. By the time she reached the break room at noon, she could barely breathe. That's when she saw Victoria Sterling. Like a ghost materializing in daylight, Victoria leaned against the doorway in a blood-red suit, her smile sharp as glass. Yasmin froze mid-step. She hadn't seen Victoria since the gala, since that night of secrets whispered behind velvet columns. And now she was here, smirking, as if she'd been watching the whole time. "Well," Victoria said casually, examining her nails, "it's always the quiet ones who make the biggest mess." Yasmin didn't respond at first. Her mouth was dry, her heart thudding like a drumline in her chest. Victoria tilted her head, stepping closer. "Relax. I'm not here to expose you. Not yet." She paused. "That was quite a stunt you pulled. All those clever little notes. The anonymous advisor saving Kenneth's precious company. It was adorable, really. Until you got in my way." Yasmin's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You were the one leaking files to Titanium Corp. You tried to bury him." Victoria smiled wider. "And I would have succeeded, if someone hadn't played hero. But now, here you are, a fraud sitting in a consultant's chair, a cleaner with a secret. How poetic." She stepped even closer, lowering her voice. "Here's the deal, sweetheart. You're going to resign, quietly. No drama, no explanation. Or I'll make sure every board member sees exactly who you are and where you come from." Yasmin's throat tightened. "You don't scare me," she said, but her voice cracked at the edges. Victoria leaned in, her breath like poison. "You should be scared. Because people like me don't lose. We erase." The door clicked shut behind her, and Yasmin stood frozen, her spine stiff, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had faced fear before. Eviction notices, hospital bills, nights where dinner was just tap water and hope. But this was different. This wasn't survival. This was sabotage, cold and calculated, coming not from life's randomness, but from someone determined to destroy her. For a long moment, she thought of quitting, walking away before the fallout, before Kenneth's faith turned to fury. before the world saw what she was. Just a cleaner who dared to do too much. But as she sat alone in the bathroom stall, eyes burning, she remembered something her mother once whispered during the darkest winter of their lives. Don't let people with titles tell you where your worth begins. You carry it with you. Every step. Every silence. Yasmin stood up. She wouldn't run. Not this time. That afternoon, Kenneth called her into his office. The air inside was thick with something unspoken. He gestured for her to sit. She did, hands clenched in her lap, chin high. He stared at her for a long moment, then opened the drawer and placed something small on the desk between them, a pearl earring. Her breath hitched. "I found this in my office Thursday night," he said calmly. "The same night someone tripped my motion sensor." Yasmin's lips parted, but no sound came. Kenneth didn't look angry. He looked curious, patient. "You've been helping me, haven't you?" he asked, softer now. "Since the first anonymous note." Yasmin swallowed hard, then nodded. Just once. A small, simple truth with enormous consequences. "Why?" he asked. Not with accusation, but with genuine wonder. "Because I could," she answered. "Because I saw a company worth saving. Because no one else would." Silence stretched between them. Then Kenneth exhaled slowly and leaned back. "I should fire you," he said. Yasmin's stomach dropped. "But I won't," he continued. "Because everything you've done worked. You've outperformed half the board. You saved my reputation. You saved this company." She blinked, barely believing it. "Then why did you bring me here?" He leaned forward. "Because I needed to hear you say it. And because now we do this the right way. From the front, not the shadows." But their fragile alliance didn't last 24 hours. The next morning, the board met in emergency session. Someone, Yasmin didn't need to guess who, had forwarded a dossier to the chairwoman, complete with time-stamped cleaning logs, security footage, and a damning narrative. Unqualified cleaner impersonates executive advisor. Deception. Breach of protocol. Corporate liability. Yasmin was suspended immediately, escorted from the building with silence so thick it felt like suffocation. No one defended her. Not at first. Kenneth was blindsided, caught between policy and truth, too late to intervene before the vote passed. As she walked out of the lobby in her blazer and slacks, not her uniform, Yasmin didn't cry. She held her head high. But inside, it felt like the walls were collapsing, like all her effort had folded into a cruel punchline. Victoria had won, at least for now. But deep down, Yasmin knew what the board didn't. The next move was hers. And this time, she wouldn't play it in secret. The days following Yasmin's suspension moved like a slow, suffocating fog. Her badge was revoked, her name scrubbed from the internal system, and every message she sent to Kenneth went unanswered. She stayed in her small apartment, pacing the floor, replaying every step that had led to her downfall. Tasha begged her to rest, to let it go. But Yasmin's mind wasn't built for surrender. She hadn't clawed her way through shame, debt, and silence to vanish without a fight. Victoria had played her hand with cruelty and precision. But Yasmin wasn't out of cards. Not yet. On the third night, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Kenneth stood in the hallway, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his eyes darker than she remembered. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You were right," he said, before she could speak. Green Horizon was compromised. Titanium's pre-launch ad campaign hit this morning, word for word identical to ours. Yasmin didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth was unfolding on its own. "Victoria," she said simply. Kenneth nodded. "And David. We have chat logs now, offshore email traffic. She planted the story about you to bury her own tracks. The board doesn't know everything, but I do. Yasmin sat down slowly, letting the weight of his words settle. So, what now? She asked. Kenneth didn't hesitate. Now we hit back. Not quietly. Not politely. I want a plan, and I want it from you. She blinked. You still trust me? He met her gaze, unflinching. I never stopped. That was all she needed. By the next morning, they were back in the war room, unofficially. Yasmin, still banned from the building, worked remotely from her laptop, while Kenneth funneled her access through a dummy account. They called the plan Project Mirror. The strategy was simple. Turn Victoria's obsession with theatrics against her. Yasmin had always said business wasn't that different from a telenovela. It just wore a better suit. And now, they would make her the villain of her own plot. The first step was misdirection. Kenneth leaked a fake internal report suggesting Lancaster Corp had pivoted the Green Horizon focus entirely, moving into a niche market Victoria couldn't replicate in time. She bit the bait, accelerating Titanium's launch to beat the new deadline. Meanwhile, Yasmin worked behind the scenes to recover the original IP proof, time-stamped prototypes, concept files, and meeting records that predated Victoria's leak by months. The evidence was airtight. All they needed was the right audience. 2 days later, Kenneth requested an emergency board meeting, citing a potential multi-million-dollar legal risk. Victoria, now smug and confident, arrived dressed like victory itself. She sat at the long glass table, legs crossed, fingers tapping against a diamond-studded clutch. When Kenneth introduced Yasmin as a strategic witness, the room shifted. Some board members raised eyebrows. Others whispered. Victoria's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Before we continue, Kenneth began, I'd like to present our full timeline of product development for Green Horizon, along with a few discrepancies I believe deserve attention. He nodded, and the screen lit up. Yasmin's presentation began rolling. Dates, emails, product schematics. At first, the room was silent. Then the murmurs began. Victoria's expression remained still, until the final slide. It was a screen cap of her private chat with David Chung, planning the leak. Dated, time-stamped, verified. This, Yasmin said calmly, is what happens when power assumes no one is watching. Victoria laughed once. This proves nothing. You can forge timestamps. Kenneth stood. We didn't. He turned to the head of legal. We had everything forensically audited. Third-party confirmation. What we have is corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and a defamation campaign against a key employee. Victoria stood slowly, but not gracefully. You don't have the spine to push this, Kenneth. He stepped forward. Then you don't know me at all. The chairwoman turned to security. Escort Ms. Sterling off the premises, effective immediately. Victoria tried to speak again, but no one was listening. She left the room flanked by 2 officers, her heels echoing like a closing chapter. When the room emptied, Yasmin remained seated, unsure whether to feel triumphant or just tired. Kenneth walked over and placed a single sheet of paper in front of her, a reinstatement letter, signed by the entire board. We don't just want you back, he said. We need you in the room. Officially, permanently. She looked at the letter, then at him. They'll never forget what I did, or where I came from. Kenneth shook his head. No, but one day, they'll forget to care. As she stepped out of the boardroom, badge in hand once more, the staff watched her with a different kind of silence. Not pity, not suspicion, something closer to awe. For the first time, Yasmin wasn't a whisper in the dark or a name behind a brilliant idea. She was real, she was undeniable, and she was exactly where she belonged. The battle was over, but the revolution was just beginning. The morning sun bled gold across the skyline, catching the glass panels of Lancaster Tower like a divine spotlight. Inside the building that once buzzed with suspicion and hierarchy, something had changed. Whispers no longer followed Yasmin Carter through the halls, not because people stopped talking, but because they started listening, truly listening. Her name wasn't spoken in secret anymore. It echoed through conference rooms and strategy meetings, attached to ideas, to decisions, to bold new visions. The former cleaning lady now walked those corridors as Director of Innovation, her office just one floor beneath Kenneth Lancaster's. The nameplate on her door shimmered with meaning far beyond the metal. Her return hadn't been quiet, nor had it been temporary. Kenneth had not only reinstated her, he had cleared her name in front of the full board and made it clear that anyone who questioned her qualifications would be answering to him. But Yasmin didn't need protection anymore. Her ideas had already proven louder than prejudice. From the first moment she sat in her new office, an elegant, sunlit space overlooking the city she once cleaned in silence, she knew this wasn't just a personal victory. It was a crack in the ceiling for others to step through. Her first initiative, launched within a month, the Hidden Talents Program. Its purpose was radical in its simplicity: to mine innovation, not from the top, but from the forgotten corners of the corporate ecosystem. Cleaners, drivers, receptionists, warehouse clerks. Yasmin opened the doors she had once stood outside of, handing tools, mentorship, and visibility to voices that had never been invited to the table. The results stunned everyone but her. Within 6 months, Lancaster Corp unveiled a logistics optimization model designed by a mailroom clerk. A former cafeteria assistant proposed a customer feedback platform now been adopted across 5 departments. The old gatekeepers were forced to admit it. Brilliance didn't wear a title. The media, of course, devoured the story. From mop to mastermind, the woman who changed corporate culture. Yasmin's face appeared on magazine covers, in think pieces, and TED stages alike. But despite the spotlight, she remained grounded. She still rode the elevator with everyone else. She still knew the names of the night staff. Sometimes, late at night, she would walk the 30th floor with a soft cloth and clean a single window, just to remind herself where it began. One evening, she found a handwritten note under her own monitor. It simply read, "Don't forget what the stars looked like before the window was clean." No signature, just 3 dots in a triangle. As for Kenneth, his transformation was quieter, but no less profound. He had always been brilliant, strategic, relentless. But Yasmin's fire had shown him something different. Not just how to lead, but who to lead with. Their partnership deepened with each passing month, from after-hours strategy sessions to long walks through the archives of the company they were rebuilding. It wasn't just respect that grew between them, it was admiration. And from admiration came something rarer, something that couldn't be contained in boardrooms or briefings. It happened slowly. A shared glance during a product launch, a soft laugh in the middle of a late-night brainstorm, a hand on her lower back as he guided her through a crowded charity gala. Not possessive, just present. Then, one spring evening, under the amber glow of the city lights, he asked her to dinner, not as a colleague, not as a CEO, just as a man who had finally found someone who challenged and inspired him in equal measure. And Yasmin, who once danced alone with a mop under those same windows, said yes. A year later, they stood on a private balcony, overlooking a skyline that no longer seemed so distant. Kenneth in a tailored navy suit, Yasmin in a satin dress the color of dusk. They raised glasses not just to survival, but to what they had built together, a legacy forged in risk, truth, and resilience. Around them, the company thrived. Recruitment soared, innovation accelerated, and morale bloomed from the ground up. Investors who once questioned her now quote her. Executives who once looked through her now looked to her. On her desk sat a framed photo of her mother, smiling from a worn kitchen chair, and next to it, a polished copy of Yasmin's newly published book, From the Floor to the Future, Rethinking Where Genius Begins. It became a bestseller within weeks, taught in business schools, and cited by leaders across industries. But Yasmin didn't write it for applause. She wrote it for the girl she used to be, the one scrubbing windows and solving balance sheets in her head while everyone else walked by. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in hues of possibility, Yasmin looked out from her office, no longer afraid, no longer hiding. She had once been the shadow that saved the company. Now, she was its guiding light. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, she whispered to herself a single truth she now lived by. Genius isn't born in the spotlight. It's forged in silence, tested in fire, and revealed when no one's watching. And so, from the ashes of deception and the glow of redemption, a new era began. Not just for Yasmin Carter, but for every overlooked mind waiting in the dark, ready to rise. Thank you for joining me on this unforgettable journey through Yasmin Carter's rise from silence to spotlight, proving that brilliance knows no uniform, no title, only courage. If her story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What moment moved you most? What part lingered after the final word? Don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 and share it with someone who might need a little reminder that potential often hides in unexpected places. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and I'll meet you again in the next story, right before you close your eyes.